The first warning came as a soft chime, almost polite, as if the station itself did not yet understand that it was about to die. And many of the officers on Outpost Virex were still smiling, still talking, still arguing about supply numbers and patrol routes when the lights shifted from white to deep red and the calm voice of the system announced an incoming hostile fleet. And laughter followed because no one believed the Korthrax would dare attack a mixed-species station guarded by treaty law. And in that moment a young human woman stood near the back of the command deck, quiet and still, her name Mara Vale, born on Earth. A world listed in the Galactic Archive as a Deathworld, a place of crushing gravity, violent storms, endless predators, and constant danger. A world many believed produced stubborn survivors but poor soldiers. And as the massive screen filled with the sharp black shapes of enemy ships tearing out of hyperspace, the laughter faded into confused silence, then fear, as energy beams sliced through the outer defense grid like it was made of paper, shaking the station hard enough to throw officers from their seats. And Commander Hesk, a tall scaled being with bright command markings, turned and saw Mara watching the screen with focused eyes, not wide with fear but narrowed with thought. And he felt irritation rise because she was not supposed to be here, not in a fleet command zone. Not a young human infantry woman among officers who had fought wars before humanity even reached the stars. And he said aloud that this was no place for a Deathworld girl, his words sharp and dismissive, drawing nervous agreement from others who needed someone weaker to blame. But Mara did not answer because she had grown up with earthquakes, storms that ripped roofs away, animals that killed without warning, and a planet that punished every mistake. And fear was something she had learned to use, not obey. And when the first Korthrax shells struck the station's outer ring, an alarm screamed in full panic. She moved before orders were even given, pulling on her helmet, checking her rifle with calm hands while officers shouted over each other. And the sensors screamed that boarding pods were incoming, which changed everything, because space battles could be watched from behind shields. But boarding meant close fighting, meant screams in hallways and blood on metal floors. And the station shook as pods slammed into the hull, cutting through walls like claws through flesh. And smoke filled the corridors as gravity flickered. And Mara ran toward the sound of cutting metal while others ran away from it, her boots hitting the floor hard, her breath steady. And when the hull finally burst open and the first Korthrax warrior stepped through, tall and armored, its body built for war alone, it expected screams or retreat because that was what usually greeted it, but instead it met a human charging forward, and the rifle shot was loud and final, dropping the alien before it could even roar. And the next one raised its weapon too slowly because it did not understand how something so small moved so fast. And Mara slid, rolled, fired again, using speed and angles, using lessons learned not from training halls, but from a world where falling meant death and hesitation meant being eaten. And as more Korthrax poured in, the hallway became chaos, smoke and fire and echoes. But the humans who followed Mara found themselves fighting harder, braver, because fear shrank when someone stood in front of it and did not break. And word spread through the station fast, faster than official reports, that a human had stopped a breach alone, that the Deathworld girl was cutting through armored invaders like they were slow, and on the command deck, feeds showed short violent flashes of combat where Mara appeared again and again, always moving forward, never stopping. And Commander Hesk watched in growing silence as Korthrax bodies filled corridors they were supposed to control, and the belief he had carried for decades began to crack because this was not reckless violence. This was controlled fury, intelligent and precise. And as the station continued to burn and shake, as more enemy ships poured fire into the hull, the truth became impossible to ignore. that humanity had not come into the galaxy weak and unready, that Earth had forged something dangerous under its heavy sky, and Mara Vale was proof, a single soldier shaped by a deadly world, showing what happened when a species raised on survival decided it would not kneel. And by the time the first hour of the attack ended, Outpost Virex was damaged, bleeding and burning, but it was still standing. And the Korthrax had lost something far more important than soldiers, because they had learned too late that the Deathworld girl could fight and that she was only one of many. After the initial shock of Mara Vale's sudden and unstoppable defense, the humans aboard Outpost Virex began to realize that the war was far from lost, and the station, though battered, became a hive of strategic activity as survivors regrouped, repaired what could be repaired, and set traps for the relentless Korthrax boarding forces. And Mara, now at the center of their attention, moved through the corridors with purpose, guiding humans and willing alien allies alike through improvised choke points, darkened halls, and emergency bulkheads that could crush or trap invaders. And at first, many hesitated to follow her, whispering doubts about a single human girl leading the defense of a key station, questioning if her Deathworld strength was enough to face such a brutal, organized enemy. But Mara showed them otherwise. Always in the lid, ducking and rolling through low-gravity sections, using exposed wiring, sharp metal fragments, and anything she could find as weapons when ammunition ran low, and she taught others through example, showing how to move faster, strike harder, and think creatively, turning every disadvantage into a deadly advantage. And as they fought together, the humans began to shed fear, their hearts pumping adrenaline, their hands steady on rifles, their minds learning quickly that the Korthrax were not invincible, that they bled, and that the battlefield could be turned by wit, courage, and unyielding determination. And Mara, never stopping, never hesitating, became a symbol, a living demonstration of what humans could endure, what they could achieve when pushed to the edge, and through her, the mixed squad discovered techniques that defied normal military doctrine, using corridors like labyrinths, zero-gravity sections as slides and platforms, and damaged machinery to create traps that shredded alien ranks, and each encounter hardened the humans, made them faster, smarter, and more coordinated. As the Korthrax realized that their traditional tactics, meant to overwhelm and terrify, were failing against creatures who refused to surrender, and the Korthrax grew angrier, sending specialized squads and commanders, each bigger, stronger, and more cruel. Yet Mara adapted with ease, dodging plasma blades, slamming enemies into walls, twisting joints with improvised knives, and occasionally using the station's own systems, like venting air to create sudden explosions that knocked their attackers senseless. And all the while, the feed from her movements circulated through the station, showing officers and civilians alike that humans were no longer prey but predators. And as the tide began to turn in the corridors, the battle spread to the larger strategic picture, where human ships arrived in the system, battered yet flying, old cargo vessels retrofitted with weapons, fighter crafts flown by pilots who would have been considered reckless anywhere else, now performing daring maneuvers to strike enemy cruisers and disrupt formations, ramming ships when weapons failed, hiding in asteroid fields, using debris as shields and weapons. And as the battle in space raged, Mara and her team pushed forward on the station, clearing sections systematically, never pausing, moving from room to room, floor to floor, marking corpses and hazards for the humans who followed, training them in real time, improvising strategies when alarms went silent, when gravity failed, when fire spread through hallways. And in one of the most critical moments, she faced a Korthrax commander in the reactor bay. a towering creature armored in black metal, its 4 arms swinging plasma blades that cut through steel. And while the squad hesitated, Mara assessed the situation quickly, analyzing weak points, dodging high and low, and used a momentary opening to strike at a reactor control panel, sending a surge of energy that threw the commander against the wall, melting circuits and tearing the armor apart. And that victory inspired the squad in the station, giving hope that the Korthrax could be defeated if humans refused to surrender and push their limits. And over the following hours, humanity's fleet joined the fight in full force, coordinating attacks, creating diversions, and showing a reckless ingenuity that alien observers had never encountered before, while Mara's tactics on the station mirrored this creativity in miniature, teaching her team to fight not like trained soldiers, but like predators born of necessity, striking from unexpected angles, using environmental hazards as weapons, and maintaining morale when despair threatened. And soon, reports came in that Korthrax ships were retreating, disorganized, their casualties rising rapidly, and the humans, though exhausted, celebrated small victories, patching wounds, and repairing ships and walls. And through it all, Mara never sought glory. Her focus on survival, leadership, and the protection of others, demonstrating that strength was not only physical but mental, emotional, and strategic. And as the enemy pulled back, it became clear that humanity had gained a reputation far beyond the system, their determination and brutality in battle proving to the galaxy that they were not fragile, that their species could endure impossible threats. And the Korthrax, who had expected easy prey, now faced the reality that humans were cunning, relentless, and willing to sacrifice everything for survival. While Mara, the Deathworld girl, continued to lead her squad, still pushing forward into danger, never resting, always adapting. Her presence a rallying point for all who fought alongside her, and each victory, each fallen alien, and each clever trap planted reinforced the lesson that humans were a force that could not be dismissed, that bravery, ingenuity, and unbreakable will could tip the scales against overwhelming odds. And as the battle continued, the humans learned more about themselves, realizing that courage was contagious, that leadership could be earned in the field, and that the galaxy would soon remember the name Mara Vale, not as a simple soldier from a harsh world, but as the spark that showed humanity's true potential, igniting a fire that would burn through enemy ranks and change the way every alien species viewed humans. A lesson in survival, strategy, and the raw, unstoppable force of a species shaped by adversity and refusing to yield. And by the time the Korthrax retreated to regroup, the humans had proven that even the smallest, most underestimated individuals could turn the tide of war when guided by skill, determination, and the unshakable spirit of a Deathworld survivor. And as the fleet repaired and the station patched its hull, whispers spread across the system. Humans fight differently. Humans fight smarter, and Mara Vale had shown them all exactly what that meant. As the remnants of the Korthrax fleet withdrew toward the Red Star Helion, leaving destruction and chaos in their wake, humanity prepared for the final confrontation, knowing that the enemy's flagship, the massive World Ender, remained a looming threat capable of crushing any resistance, and that the ultimate victory required a daring and precise strike. And Mara Vale, now known across the fleet as the Deathworld girl who had turned the tide on Outpost Virex, volunteered without hesitation to lead a strike team directly onto the flagship, understanding that this mission would be nearly suicidal, but also realizing that it was the only way to end the war quickly and save countless human lives. And the team she led was a mix of humans and alien allies who had learned to fight alongside her in close quarters, following her without question, inspired by her courage and skill, And as their ship approached the world ender, the size of the vessel became overwhelming, its hull black and jagged, bristling with weapons and guarded by automated drones that patrolled the surface, and Mara calmly reviewed the plan, knowing that stealth, timing, and precision were critical, guiding her team through maintenance shafts and service tunnels that allowed them to bypass the main decks and strike at the heart of the ship, where its command and power systems intersected. And as they moved, the corridors became alive with danger. Automated defenses activating, Korthrak's warriors appearing around corners, and Mara's team had to rely on her instincts and their training to survive, and she led them through zero-gravity sections where they floated silently, striking from unexpected angles, using environmental hazards as weapons, venting plasma conduits to create explosions that hurled enemies into walls, and hacking security panels to lock doors or flood chambers with electrical discharge, and each step forward was a battle, testing their courage, skill, and teamwork. But Mara's presence kept everyone focused, moving, and fighting. And as they reached the core of the world ender, they found themselves trapped in a section where doors had sealed and automated defenses surged to life. And the Korthraks, anticipating intruders, poured waves of soldiers into the chamber, towering, multi-armed creatures wielding plasma weapons and armored so heavily that ordinary strikes could not pierce them. And Mara, assessing the situation in an instant, ordered her team to the escape pods while she stayed behind, telling them firmly to run and save themselves because she would hold the enemy long enough for the charges they had planted to detonate. And despite their protests and pleas, she shoved them into the escape tunnel, sealing it behind them, and turned to face the incoming wave alone, knowing that she might never leave the ship alive. And as the first wave of Korthraks charged, Mara fought with everything she had, firing her last rounds, striking with knives, kicking and twisting joints, using her body as a weapon when all else failed. And though her armor cracked and her bones began to ache and bleed, she did not stop, moving with speed and precision born of a lifetime on a Deathworld, dodging energy blasts, smashing through doors, and creating openings for herself with sheer will and strength. And as more waves came, her actions delayed the enemy long enough for the countdown on the charges to continue, her fight becoming almost a dance of violence, brutal and beautiful, a singular force standing against the tide of an entire alien command. And in the last moments before the explosion, Mara's body was battered, her strength fading, yet her mind remained sharp, directing attacks, improvising with broken pipes and panels, never yielding to panic. And when the charges finally detonated, a massive explosion consumed the world ender, tearing it apart in a blinding flash of fire and light. And Mara's body, still inside, vanished with the ship, her fate uncertain but her impact undeniable. And across the galaxy, the human fleet watched the flagship collapse. And for the first time, the Korthraks admitted defeat, retreating from the system entirely, their pride and power shattered. And the humans, exhausted and grieving, took stock of their losses and their victories. And the legend of Mara Vale spread quickly, a story of courage, skill, and unyielding determination that inspired not only those who had fought beside her but also the species across countless worlds, who began to see humanity as more than fragile prey, as a force that could endure impossible odds and fight back with cunning, strength, and relentless spirit. And historians later recorded her actions as the defining moment of the war, noting how a single human, born on a harsh world that had forged resilience and ferocity, had turned the tide and shown the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. And while the cost was high, the victory cemented humanity's place among the stars, the memory of Mara Vale, the Deathworld girl, immortalized as a symbol of everything humans could achieve when driven by courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable will to survive. And on worlds far from the battlefield, parents told their children her story, admirals studied her tactics, and soldiers trained to emulate her fearlessness, knowing that when the universe looked down on humanity, it would always remember the girl who stood alone against impossible odds, and that in the end, they stopped counting the bodies because the lesson had been learned. Humans fight differently. Humans fight relentlessly, and one Deathworld girl had proven the galaxy wrong.